tolerate and what they don't like to tolerate. But most of them do have to continue for some time, because you got to realize that by the time you get to see me, it's usually about 20, 25 years of this kind of excessive insulin state. And it's not going to go away in a month, right? Even if you do a lot of fasting, it's not going to go away. It takes time, right? It can go away, but it takes time and it takes a lot of work at it. So you do see the benefits, but you know, what I'm saying is you can't just do one fast or two fasts and three fasts and say, oh look, you know, there's nothing, right? I went back to eating white bread and look, my sugar is high, right? That did nothing. That's not the point, right? The point is that if you kind of continue to apply these things, then you will see benefits, right? And that's the thing. If you don't eat, your sugars will go down. Now, I take the point that it's not for everybody. I'm just saying it's an option for people, right? Does everybody have to? No, not at all. And if you find that you're losing tons of muscle, then don't do it. If you're an ultra endurance athlete and you worry about it, then don't do it, right? But it's an option for people. It's an option for people to use when they need to, when they don't need to, but you can't expect that it's going to do every day. It's like you can't undo those years and years of problems in such a short time. It takes time, and you have to follow them. You have to make sure they follow through with it, and that's what we do for people.
Thanks, everybody. You all had such a fantastic lectures. It was a very enjoyable afternoon. I have two questions for Jason. One is really quick. Do you use appetite suppressants? Do you think it's a good idea?
I think that there are some natural appetite suppressants. So some people find coffee as a natural appetite. I mean, guess what? I was going to say natural, but coffee and green tea have often been considered appetite suppressants. Some people consider things like cinnamon. So I don't use like drugs, right? Exactly. I don't use any of those, but I allow green tea and coffee and all that sort of thing. One of the other big advantages of using things like that is that there's a huge placebo effect, right? So you could give a placebo and get like 50% response, so why not, right? So if you say, oh yeah, you should drink green tea because it's going to suppress your appetite, guess what? It will, right? You should drink water because it will suppress your appetite. It will. And I don't see anything wrong with that, right? The thing about the placebo effect is that the effect is actually quite real. So I don't see why we wouldn't use it to our benefit, right? So yes, I think that there probably is a small effect of these things, coffee, and interestingly enough, people also describe it with decaf coffee. So it's not necessarily the caffeine, maybe it's all those various antioxidants and so on, but green tea, you know, they talk about these catechins and stuff. So there may be something there. I don't care particularly. I just tell people, yeah, it'll suppress your appetite. The more enthusiastic you are, the better effect.
And then a longer question, or harder maybe, is how do you evaluate if somebody is losing too much protein, you know, as they're going through, and you say, how do you decide, oh, it's time to stop this particular fast or have more protein or anything like that?
That's a difficult question because measuring it is actually very difficult, right? So you can do various DEXA scans, but from a clinical standpoint, I don't do that. For the most part, most of the patients I treat are not that worried about, you know, lifting 500 pounds, right? Deadlifting and stuff. Most of the patients are worried about their type 2 diabetes. So I take it that if muscle strength is your major concern, then maybe you shouldn't be fasting, right? But if you're worried about having type 2 diabetes, then maybe it's worth it, right? And I don't think that there is a magic number, a magic pill. You know, to me, I say if you're worried about losing a lot of muscle, then you should probably do some exercise, right? Because we all know that if you lift weights, you will build muscle, right? Now, you do need to eat protein for that, right? Because you can't build muscle out of, like, nothing. You do need to eat protein for that, for sure. But if it's your diabetes, if it's your weight, then it's an option for people, right? And I think that that's really my major point with the protein, yes. Perhaps you do lose some muscle. You lose some muscle with most diets, right? Most people who lose weight, if you measure them, they will lose muscle. So you saw the Biggest Loser slide, right? So you saw the muscle mass and the fat mass. You saw most of it. Now they're exercising like crazy, right? That's how they maintained a lot of muscle, but they still lost muscle, right? This is not fasting. They lost muscle. They're exercising freaking like 5 hours a day, right? And Jillian Michaels is screaming, you know, in their ear. You still lost muscle, right? So I'm not saying that you're not gonna lose muscle ever, right? You may lose muscle, but you will with other diets too.
My real concern actually is about, and I didn't clarify this, about the brain protein, because we can actually tell people to do some mild exercise, and we know, I think, from other studies that it helps to preserve muscle mass during any kind of weight loss. So I imagine it's the same in fasting, but it's protein's going to come from somewhere, and so if you are preserving it in your muscle, and if your brain is 50% protein, which I like to think mine is, then we have no way of measuring what's going on in there, and that's where I'm just like would be nice to have some kind of a way to evaluate that.
And this is the thing, right? If I just made up fasting like yesterday, yeah, I'd say, yeah, you should be concerned, right? But you've only been doing it since like dawn of time, right? And much of it was inadvertent, right? But again, if you think that you're gonna lose a lot of muscle, like let's forget about a little bit of muscle here and there, right? Let's say you're gonna lose a lot of muscle when you fast and gain it all back as fat. Well, what would happen, right? You'd see all those traditional societies, those, you know, aboriginals and stuff, and they'd be nothing but fat, right? Because they had a lot of feast famine cycles, right? So again, leaving aside some of the nitpicky stuff about whether you actually lose muscle or not, let's just say that the huge amount of skeletal muscle loss is not really within my realm of concern, only because it's withstood the test of time, right? I mean, are you saying that now that we eat like all this food, we're so much more muscular than we were in 1950? I doubt it very much, right? I wouldn't be too worried about it. Again, it depends on where your concerns lie, right? If your concerns is about type 2 diabetes, then this is an effective treatment, okay? And same as the diet. If you're worried about muscle loss, then yeah, and that's your primary concern, I take that, then don't do it, right? It's not that you have to do it. But again, be clear on what your goal is, like what you're trying to get out of this diet, and be clear on what it is that you're willing to do for it, right? So if you're worried about muscle loss, yeah, exercise more, maybe fasting is not for you.
I'd add that, so one part of the literature we didn't really talk about is the work of Bruce Bistrian around protein-sparing modified fasts. And so we talked about intermittent fasting and fat fasting, but so in the 70s and early 80s, Bistrian and colleagues did a series of trials where they were admitting participants to the hospital ward and monitoring them and monitoring their meals. But the diet that they were prescribing basically was a fast, but with enough supplementation of protein that they were retaining lean body mass.
First of all, I just wanted to thank the panel and as well as all the other presenters today. It was truly a very fascinating discussion and presentations. Thank you. My background is in law, so my concern is more of a kind of a public policy type of approach to promoting low carb and paleo and these type of diets. So what I've noticed, and I'm sure everybody else has too, that in the last year or two, there's been some sort of like either the pharmaceutical industry or the food industry coming out and publishing bogus studies to defend their profits. So recently there was like the 9 mice study, and then just a couple of months ago, I think Coca-Cola gave University of Colorado $300,000 to put together a bogus dietary conference and said that promoted shorter lifespans. One of the speakers actually, went ahead and said shorter lifespans was like good for the national budget or something like that. So I wanted to know that look them up. That I would like to know whether is there some sort of response to this in terms of like, can we form a nonprofit to swiftly address these issues that come out, you know, in terms of bad studies, in terms of like, you know, calling out these companies and these industries for promoting bad science, you know, things like that. Is there any sort of effort, and what can we do as kind of like, you know, spectators and weekend warriors about this? Thank you.
I would mention or direct people toward one, which is the formation of the Nutrition Coalition over the last year. Dr. Sarah Hallberg is the interim director of that, and Nina Teicholz has been very involved as well. So that is an effort to bring more scientific information to light as it relates to dietary guidelines. And if you go to their website, I believe they have a press release that talks about the 2000 and prior to the 2015 dietary guidelines being released, Congress passed in the last budget resolution a statement that directing the National Institutes of Medicine to do a full sort of survey or digging deeper into how the dietary guidelines are created. And so maybe one of the other panelists knows more about that, but I think that's worth people being familiar with.
Certainly in the United Kingdom, me and some of the other doctors, we're trying to form sort of collaboration together. There's someone called Sam Felton has put together something called Public Health Collaboration, and so it's a few doctors, some of us in the media, which also helps to get the message out myself, Aseem Malhotra and 10 others have got together to try and challenge some of the existing dietary guidance. Again, you know, obviously what's going on in the States, what's going on in the UK, hopefully the more awareness that this brings, there'll be sort of public demand. And the other point I think is important is, I think we run into problems when we try and give one set of dietary guidelines for everybody. And it's easier then to criticize those guidelines and say, well, you know, that's not right for this, that's not right for this. Let's be honest, type 2 diabetes is, and pre-diabetes and insulin resistance is a major public health issue. It's a financial issue. It will bankrupt healthcare systems. And the solution is relatively simple, actually, which is what's so baffling, I think, to so many of us here. And so I think if we can be quite specific with this kind of dietary intervention for this kind of problem, I think maybe we can bat off some of the criticism. Anyway, these are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I spoke about the sort of project that we're trying in Australia. I think we're a bit all old-fashioned and so on, and I think we need to realise that if you want to run a campaign these days, you run a social media campaign and you run a celebrity base. They recently published the list of the people who have the highest Twitter following in health and nutrition in my country, and not one of them was a doctor. In fact, I think that was the highest one.
That could be a good thing.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, back in the day, people got their health advice from doctors. Nowadays, they get them from the internet. They get them from celebrities. They get from social media blogs, and it's usually a fitness person. They often have very good ideas. I mean, you know, look at Jimmy does a fantastic job on social media, and a number of people in this room do. So I think, you know, you've got to be smart. You know, we've got to get celebrities on board. We've got to get high-profile athletes on board. We've got to do a social media campaign. I mean, that's how people change their opinion these days. It's no use writing articles in news. Nobody reads newspaper. Nobody reads sort of serious newspapers anymore. Not the sort of people we're trying to get to. And I think the only way that governments are going to respond and act is people pressure. And is, you know, they're not going to get. We're up against some very big enemies. You know, we're up against the medical profession, the dietitians, the food industry, agriculture, and most of the politicians. You know, that's a pretty formidable set of opponents. And we've got to be smart and get around it. You know, I mean, there've got to be Obama-like campaigns. You know, social media-based and celebrity-based, really clever stuff. And that's the way we're going to get our message across.
Okay, 3 quick questions, and we're going to call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm Adam Neely from Arizona. The two-part question. In my office, we use low carbohydrate, very ketogenic diets, and I see regression of the diseases of civilization within 18 to 24 months, insulin resistance and diabetes. What I wanted to know is, do you have any data that shows adding intermittent fasting speeds that process, number one? And number two, we also are doing chronological studies looking at atherosclerotic plaques and the formation, and I'm actually seeing it regress with ketogenic diets in my office. Do you see that with intermittent fasting, does it speed the process?
I don't actually have, there really is very little data on fasting in general, right? So that data really just doesn't exist. So I can only tell you kind of anecdotally for whatever it's worth, right? I think the goal of intermittent fasting and also of low carbohydrate diets, in my mind, is really to try and reduce insulin, because a lot of these diseases, I think, are diseases of hyperinsulinemia. So the whole point is to lower insulin. So yes, from a purely practical standpoint, I actually started with low carbohydrate diets, but I didn't find them kind of effective enough for many patients. So the addition of intermittent fasting or even extended fasting really helped boost that. So the surprise was that many people found it much easier, actually. And that was something that really, you can't kind of quantify so much. People find intermittent kind of regimens a little easier to take, and if they find it easier to follow, then great, right? That's whatever works for you. So I have no problem with low carbohydrate diets. I think people do very, very well. But again, it offers an option. So if you look at just studies of, say, insulin, then yeah, fasting does a better job lowering insulin than low carbohydrate diets. You can say that, but whether or not it does a better job for type 2 diabetes or weight gain, all that sort of thing, I think so, but I couldn't make that with any kind of data behind it.
Last question.
You mentioned that a social movement would be a great way to go. Do you know of any of the presidential candidates eat a low-carb diet?
Well, actually, I believe that Bill Clinton has been on a low-carb diet. I'm not sure about Hillary or whether Hillary and Bill have anything to do with each other, but other than in public. But he's certainly, well known to have been on a low-carb diet. So I'm not sure what Hillary's. Is Hillary still a candidate? Yeah, I think she is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, panel. Thanks for the wonderful questions. So just a reminder that we're going to start tomorrow at